So, in May of 2020, they sent Joseph home from federal prison early, with about 5 years still left to serve. COVID, home confinement, the whole deal. And honestly, fair enough. Nobody wanted people dying in a cell over a paperwork crime. Except Joseph was not actually free. He was still an inmate, still serving that sentence, just doing it in his own house in Gastonia, North Carolina. The elderly people he and his family had talked out of their retirement savings never got a break like that. They just got older. 48 days in, Joseph was already lying to a bank for more. And that is the part that ends up costing him. So let's back up, because the sentence Joseph was carrying was not a small one, and it was not for a small thing. Joseph DiBruno Jr. is 54 years old, out of Gastonia, North Carolina. Before any of this, he was 1/3 of a family operation. Him, his father, and his brother. And what the three of them sold was hope. 4 businesses.
If you look
A Florida
closely at
company
this area
pushing a
of the desert
fat-free,
landscape near the
cholesterol-lowering
mine
milk
entrance,
substitute,
the preliminary surveys
an online
indicate
auction
strong
house
potential.
over in Belmont, a gold mine out in New Mexico, and a food supplement that was, according to the pitch, going to end world hunger. End world hunger. That was the line they carried to retirees for their savings. The pitch went something like, hand over the retirement account and we will grow it for you. Prosecutors said the people who handed money to those businesses were elderly or infirm, not investors in any real sense. Just older people with a lifetime of savings and a retirement account, and somebody at the door being very warm about it. Court records say the trio took almost $4 million. There was no gold mine. There was no milk. There was nothing at the end of any of it, because there was never supposed to be anything at the end of it. The businesses existed, so the family had a name to write on the paperwork. And the money did not just sit there once it came in. One of the charges Joseph pleaded to was concealment of assets, which in plain English means the money went somewhere harder to find. Think about who was on the other end of those phone calls. Somebody already retired, living on an account they had spent a working life filling, with exactly one shot at getting it right. There is no second career waiting for that person. There is no earning it back. Taking the savings off someone, that age costs them the last stretch of their life they had any say over. That is the crime. 4 businesses that made nothing, sold by 3 men who knew they made nothing, to the people least able to survive finding out. In 2008, Joseph pleaded guilty in federal court in Charlotte. Conspiracy to defraud the United States, money laundering conspiracy, and concealment of assets. He got 262 months. That is 21 years and change for a man who never raised a hand to anybody. That is what a federal judge decided this was worth. And 262 months is not a number a judge signs and then forgets. The Bureau of Prisons put his release date at June of 2025. Then 2020 happened. I don't need to describe what a prison looked like in the spring of 2020. Concrete, shared air, nowhere to stand that isn't 6 inches from somebody else. So, the federal government went looking for people it could move out of those buildings, and Congress gave the Bureau of Prisons room to do it. Older inmates. Non-violent ones. People whose whole crime was a stack of paper. Joseph fit. On the 8th of April in 2020, the Bureau of Prisons approved him for home confinement. Court records put the start of it on the 7th of May, and Joseph was not released. Home confinement is not parole. It is not early release, and it is not time off. Nobody shortened his sentence by a single day. The Bureau of Prisons changed the address of the building he was serving it in. His house became the institution. He was an inmate at his own kitchen table, still on the federal books, still in custody, with a release date, sitting out there in 2025. The house was the prison. That is the entire idea behind it. And he had rules. Home confinement is not house arrest with the front door left open. The Bureau of Prisons keeps you at a registered address, checks on you, and can haul you straight back inside for breaking the terms it sets. The government knew where Joseph lived, and the government knew what Joseph was, which, if you ask me, is a genuinely decent thing for a country to do. It cost his victims nothing. It kept a man alive. And it asked exactly one thing of Joseph in return, which was to sit still for 5 years. The reasoning behind it was not complicated either. He was in his 50s. He had a fraud conviction with no violence anywhere near it, and the alternative was a virus moving through a building full of bunk beds. You did not have to like Joseph to think that was the right call. If he had done his 5 years, there is no story here. The sentence runs out in 2025. He walks out his own front door a free man, and nobody ever makes a video about him. Now the 48 days. That is the gap. From the 7th of May, the day the government trusted him with a door, to the 24th of June, the day prosecutors say Joseph sent off his first fraudulent loan application. 48 days. And not 48 days of freedom, because he did not have any. 48 days into a 5-year sentence, he was serving in his own living room. 48 days rules out desperation. It rules out the slow slide, the bad year, the bills stacking up until a man does something stupid at the end of his rope. 7 weeks. He was barely unpacked. Whatever Joseph was going to do, he had decided before the ink was dry. He did not sit in that house for 2 years watching his options close one by one. He got the gift, he looked at it, and inside of 2 months, he was back at a table doing the exact thing that put him in a cell in the first place. If you're into this one, go ahead and subscribe. I dig up a story like this every week. So Joseph filed one fake loan application 7 weeks into his sentence. He was never going to stop at one. Between May of 2020 and June of 2021, prosecutors said Joseph sent at least 5 fraudulent loan applications to 2 different financial institutions, going after more than $120,000. A solid year of it. So this was a routine. 1 application is a bad night. 5 of them across a year is a man going back to work. And whatever the first bank told him, it clearly was not enough, because he went and found a second institution to try it on. And if the applications had only been optimistic, Joseph might have had something to argue about in court. But then, you read what he put on them. On one of them, Joseph said he was employed as Director of Data Analytics at a company that shows up on the paperwork as 3 letters, MRS. He put his salary at up to $8,000 a month. And he said he had lived at that address for over 4 years. None of it was true. Director of Data Analytics. This is a man who had been in federal custody for more than a decade, sitting in a house the Bureau of Prisons was using as a cell, telling a credit union he had a management job in data. Up to $8,000 a month. If you are going to invent an entire career out of nothing, that is a remarkably modest ceiling. Every job on earth was available to him, and he gave himself a mid-level office salary and a title with 3 words in it. I guess he was trying to look believable. Then the 4 years at the address. Joseph had been there about 7 weeks, and before that he was living somewhere with considerably more locks on it, which, looking back, was either incredibly brave or incredibly stupid. A man serving a federal sentence for fraud, filling out a bank form and lying on it. In writing. to a federally insured institution. While the Bureau of Prisons had that exact address on file as the place he was incarcerated, the FBI and the United States Postal Inspection Service ran the investigation. And a fraud case built on loan applications is not a hard case to build. Every lie is a document. Every document carries his name and a date and a signature. Joseph wrote the evidence himself 5 times and sent it in. There was no manhunt in this one, and nobody had to outsmart anybody. A federal fraud case against a man signed whose address was already sitting on a Bureau of Prisons form is about as short a walk as investigators ever get. They had his paperwork, and they had the truth, and the two did not match. On the 6th of April in 2022, Joseph pleaded guilty to making false statements to a credit union. 2 guilty pleas, 14 years apart, both of them for lying about money. Sentencing came on the 25th of January in 2023. And the judge on the bench was Frank Whitney. Judge Whitney had seen Joseph DiBruno before. He is the judge who sentenced the DiBruno family the first time around. He is the man who handed Joseph the 262 months. Same courthouse, same judge, same defendant, and the same crime in a smaller font. Whitney did not have much patience left for it. He said Joseph had received a windfall under the CARES Act. That was his word for it. A windfall. The government handed him a gift, and Joseph got, in the judge's words, right back in the game. Whitney said he had a serious history of committing fraud. And he said Joseph had never learned his lesson. Then he gave him 24 months. 2 years does not sound like much for all that. But the sentence was consecutive, not concurrent. Those 24 months do not run alongside the sentence Joseph was already serving. They get stacked onto the end of it. Every day of the original 21 years is still owed, in full, and the new 2 years starts when that finishes. So Joseph took 5 years at his own kitchen table and turned it into 5 years, plus 2 more, served in a federal prison, in front of the one judge in America who already knew exactly what he was. In May of 2020, the federal government looked at Joseph DiBruno Jr. and decided a man who steals with paperwork should not have to risk dying in a cell over it. So they sent him home, still serving that sentence at his own address. 48 days later, he was sitting at a table in that house, filling out a form, lying on it, reaching for somebody else's money again. The elderly people whose retirement accounts paid for a gold mine that never existed never got a windfall. Joseph got one, and this is what he spent it on. More stories like this on the channel.